So welcome to this Wish National event. Jo's named it, These Boots Are Made for Thinking, but we've just heard that she's been doing a lot of walking, but she'll tell you about that. So Jo's our guest speaker today. She's currently president of the Chartered Institute of Housing. And if I'm right, Jo, you're the Associate Dean Research and Professor of Housing and Social Inclusion at Montfort University. Jo will reflect in the session on her career in housing, which has been very long, and well, not so long here, but long, I think we'd say, and share more about her CIH Homeful campaign, which is raising money to end youth homelessness. I think just a bit about Wish as well. You'll be aware that Wish is a network of professional women working across all disciplines of UK housing. So it's not just housing associations, we have lots of associated companies like solicitors, contractors, etc. But also, so our membership's pulled from both public and private sectors. We arrange events like this to provide the opportunity to learn more about whatever issues that are arising that are current, but also we do take our lead from our members. So we take suggestions from our members and organise events around your suggestions. But most importantly, we bring people together to network, and that can be in person or via Zoom, as we're doing now. As we go along, as Jo goes along, please do use the chat function to put any questions, and we'll come to those at the end. But also, we'd like you to use this event, if you like, to chat amongst each other. So use the chat function for that as well. I think what Wish is very much about is bringing women together so that we support each other, and together we are kind of bigger, greater than the sum of our parts.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Lynn. I'm really grateful to you and Lucy and the team at Wish for inviting me to come to this meeting, give me the opportunity to talk with you all. I'm a huge fan of women in social housing, just seeing the strength of your network and the networks across the UK, and what happens in terms of sharing ideas, fundraising, networking. It's so important, I think, that we support one another and that we amplify the voices of women in social housing. So I feel very honoured to have been asked to come and talk with you all today. Thank you. As Lynn said, my name's Jo. I work at Montfort University in Leicester, have done for the last 20 years, but I'm a bit of an accidental academic. I'm a very purposeful housing person though. I'm not someone who fell into housing. I really purposely chose it as a career. So I guess my plan today, and it's really informal, is just to, I guess, tell you a bit about me and my career in housing, and then talk to you about the Homeful campaign and to see how you might like to get involved in that. So as I mentioned, I'm a purposeful housing professional, and this happens, I was 18, I'd finished my A-levels, hadn't done particularly brilliantly, but had managed to secure a scholarship to go to a school in America for a year. And so I got to do my senior year in high school. I got my high school diploma, but one of the most important parts in that year, as well as seeing new places and meeting new people, was this experience I had to volunteer. So we were all encouraged to do a voluntary project for sort of 3 to 4 weeks just before the spring break. And this was in 1991, I was there. So spring of 1991, I volunteered with an organisation called New York City Relief. And this is a charity who worked with people experiencing homelessness. Back in those days, people talked about helping the homeless. I guess I just want to take a moment now to reflect on what I've learned over the last 30 years or so about how we use that language. For a start, I try not to talk about the homeless or homeless people because it foregrounds homelessness as though it's a characteristic of the person, whereas it's an indicator of social policy failure. It's not an individual characteristic. So I try really hard to remember to use the phrase people experiencing homelessness, because it foregrounds the people bit. But back then, this charity was helping the homeless. And I'd never experienced anything like it before. I'd come from a really, really stable family background. I'd moved once at the age of 2, which I don't remember. And had taken home for granted, like seriously taken it for granted. Had never critically examined the concept of home in my head. I guess partly because I was a teenager, and teenagers are quite self-absorbed. So I had just, it was there. And it wasn't until I was there in that space on what were quite gritty streets in 1991. This is just before Giuliani had kind of, in his role as mayor, had kind of gentrified New York to the place it is now. So it felt really real. I was suddenly there and thought, wow, I had not expected this. And I had met quite a lot of young people. I mean, I'd met people of all ages. So in 1991, we were still seeing people who were Vietnam vets. We were seeing a legacy of people who'd been stigmatized because they had HIV and AIDS. So there's a real breadth of this, across the equality characteristics. But I guess because I was 18, 19, I really remember the conversations I had with people of my own age. And I was there thinking, right, what's next? I've really enjoyed the traveling, I've enjoyed the learning, meeting new people. I'd now like to carry on with my education. I wonder what my job might be. I wonder what my future will look like. And the people of the same age as me were not thinking that. They were thinking, I'm hungry. I've not been able to finish my schooling. I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight. Their long-term future was kind of that night, what they were going to be doing. There wasn't the space because they didn't have the freedom of the stability of knowing where home was. So they couldn't think more broadly. And I just remember thinking that's just terribly unfair. The lack of a home, it's not just about what's happening in the here and now. You're kind of stealing young people's futures as well. So at that moment, it kind of just hit me, and I thought, I really want my life to be involved in home, helping to provide home, whatever in whatever format that is. And I've been really lucky with support of CIH, which I'm so proud to be president of now. I've always had that support to undertake my education and my training and my CPD and to work in housing. So I came back from America and thought I'd like to do something in the public sector. So I did a public administration degree. I then got a job at the council, worked with a housing team, realised my options for improving my knowledge through CIH professional qualification. So I did my master's. I did tested professional practice at the time, not online, a little green paper booklet, if I remember, and you'd go running around. It was a license to be nosy. So I would run around the council, knock on a senior person's door, but I would not have had the confidence to do that otherwise. I have an excuse. I need to take that I've done this thing and I'd like to work with your team for a week or whatever so that I can understand this some more. And so it opened my horizons yet further, doing that test of professional practice and the qualification. I'm still in touch with colleagues who I did my master's with now, and we compare notes. Some of us are in different sectors, the care sector, some have stayed in the housing sector. So it's been great to kind of go along that journey with them. So that was really how I got into housing. So I was a housing assistant for a local authority. After my master's, I then moved to a housing association. Both of these roles were in fairly generic positions. So the first was as a housing assistant, doing home visits, filling in forms, particularly working with people experiencing homelessness, providing advice. And then the housing association, managing a patch, mixed tenure, about 800 stock on my patch, and just, a bit of everything. And just loved it, loved talking with people, loved trying to find solutions, loved the continued sort of learning that you could get. So I guess this is the accidental academic in me. I hadn't realised at the time, but just loved that I could always find a course to learn a bit more about what I was doing and then immediately put it into practice. I think that's one of the benefits of part-time professional education, is you get to apply it as you're learning it. And then an opportunity came up to work for CIH. This was back in the days when it was the Department for Transport, Local Government and the Regions. So would have been late 90s, early 2000. No, yeah, 1997, somewhere around there, I joined CIH. And it was a project funded by DTLR at the time to collect good practice across the UK. So I got to travel all around the UK, go and visit organisations, see what they were doing. And then I was a team of practice briefings. We're part of the good practice unit. But that really started to move my thinking on from doing the day-to-day job to thinking, well, how can you kind of scale that up? How can you scale the impact that you can have up through the written word, through sharing? So I really like the idea of sharing good practice. So that really whetted my appetite and got me onto a bit of a track towards this accidental academic career that I have had. Someone invited me to come back and teach on a module that I hadn't done too badly on as part of my master's, and kind of the rest is history. I took a fixed term contract role to manage a research centre, did my PhD, and here I am today, sort of 20 years later. I've directed a research centre, Associate Dean Research. So my role is looking after all of the researchers in our faculty. So it's a big role, a really busy role. And although I guess I've progressed in my academic life in terms of promotions, I have always retained that housing heart as part of what I do. So my own research has always been focused on social housing. A lot of it has been around gypsy and traveller accommodation. So I've become reasonably well known in terms of that area of research. And that's partly because when I looked at marginalised communities and access to home, gypsies and travellers, very sadly, are pretty much at the bottom of the list in terms of ability to access safe and secure, quality, affordable housing in a form that is suitable for their cultural requirements. So that just stood out at me, and I did it as my PhD, and I've not been able to leave it alone in the intervening sort of 15 to 20 years. So that's kind of taken me to where I am today, and just, as I say, immensely proud to be CIH president, having started out that life in 1995 as a student member, and then here I am now with this platform to do something. And I thought straight away, we get to run a campaign. Each president does a campaign. You'll have heard about Aileen Evans, my predecessor last year, who looked at shining a light on mental health. A really amazing project that she ran there. I thought, well, what am I going to do? It's got to be around homelessness. It's got to be around this issue, particularly as we were emerging from the pandemic. And so that's really where Homeful was born. It's a made-up word. It's a mixture of hopeful and home, and an antonym to homeless. And it's an action research project, so anyone can get involved. I've already cheekily put the Just Giving link in the chat, but I'll put the wider project link in the chat as well. And you can then access the initial report that came out last summer that we did for Homeful, just as a starter. And you can access a toolkit for how to get involved. So I'm looking for every single local authority and housing association to complete a survey. And there's a survey also for residents. And I'm also looking for organisations to run workshops. I think there's going to be a social media competition by a social media company coming up quite soon as well. I'm doing a few podcasts. So there's a few different links that will come from the link I'll put in the chat. And I'd really love it if as many people as possible could get involved, particularly in terms of running workshops and feeding in, sharing good practice, because it's something that I think is really important. I think rightly, the sector has been challenged. If we look at what Kwajo Twanaboa has been saying in terms of his activism around the quality of social housing, it's right that we stop for a minute and think, are we getting it as right in as many cases as we possibly can do? And I talked a bit about this in my speech last week at the presidential dinner. Would I want to live in this property should probably be the first question you would ask when you're visiting someone's home, and we need to do that. And I think in the vast majority of cases we do. But clearly there are cases that are slipping through the gaps. And so we do need to have that moment of reflection. But as I say, in the vast majority of cases, we are doing as a sector a really good job. And if you look at what we did during COVID-19, the lockdown and the pandemic, everyone in, and the agility and the coordination of the responses to bring people in from the streets and provide them with temporary accommodation was extraordinary. You know, if you told housing associations and local authorities that they needed to do this before the pandemic, there would have been so many reasons why it wouldn't have been possible. And then all of a sudden, because we had to do it, it was done, and it was done very, very well. You know, it's sort of a world leading example of what was done during the pandemic. But we don't want to lose sight of that. We need to show that. So we need to demonstrate this is what the social housing sector is about. This is what we've done. This is what we can do. And this is what we will do. And that's really what the action research is about. So I would love it if you could share your examples, particularly thinking we're not only looking at street homelessness here. We're taking the widest possible definition of homelessness. So if you're in precarious or temporary or unaffordable accommodation, if you're a family living in bed and breakfast, you know, all of these examples, if you're sleeping at a friend's house, if you're in your home as a result of domestic or family violence, all of these are examples of broader homelessness. And there are some brilliant preventative strategies, policies and practices that we can share. So I'd really like to do that. So please do share your ideas. As I say, there's also the fundraising element of it. And it was that made me think about giving this talk the title that I did. So, you know, you'll all know the song, These Boots Were Made for Walking. And that goes through my head quite a lot, the cadence that I walk at. But it was thinking about that. It was thinking about the book that got me started on that, which is Rainer Wynne's The Salt Path, which I found inspirational. And it was also thinking about a couple of other books I'd read about walking. Kate Humble wrote a book called Thinking on My Feet. And it occurred to me just how much thinking I get done while I am walking. And it linked me back to thinking about Aileen Evans' campaign, which was about shining a light on mental health. And so I got to thinking about the connections that we need to make, both with outdoors. And, you know, I felt very lucky during the pandemic to have a garden so I could get outside, and not everyone has that. So every step I take is another thought, you know, another pattern of thoughts, really. So I thought, yeah, these boots are definitely made for thinking as much as they are for walking. But the walk, I'll tell you a bit more about it. It's ridiculous, frankly. I set out a week tomorrow, I'm going to get on a train to Taunton and then head over to Minehead, ready for day one of a 46-day walk that I am going to do. So if anyone's read The Salt Path by Rainer Wynne, you'll have anticipated what I'm going to say here, but I'm going to walk the Southwest Coast Path. I've walked 7 legs already, and I'm not going to repeat those. The most recent, I did the Heartland Key to Bude section 2 weeks ago, which they say is the most severe bit in the book. But I've got 46 legs left to go, and I'm going to walk them all in one go, setting out a week on Friday, finishing on the 30th of May. I guess an average, between sort of 13 to 15 miles a day. Some days are a little bit less, but there's quite a few of those. And the idea is to raise the profile of the Homeful campaign, to get people thinking about homelessness because of the connection with the story in Rainer Wynne's The Salt Path. Rainer and her husband become homeless, and they walk. He's also not very well, and he starts to feel better with the walking. So it's to raise that idea, and also to raise funds. And the charity that I'm supporting with the walk is End Youth Homelessness. And this is a collection of the leading youth homelessness charities across the UK. So there are charities in all of the devolved countries, and there are charities across the different regions of England as well. So hopefully, wherever you are in the country, if you look on the End Youth Homelessness website and the partners page, and then you see the charity partners, you'll be able to hopefully find a charity that you know that's local-ish you in the region, so that you feel that closer connection. But there are so many examples on the of what the money does. So it goes to employment bursaries, it goes to housing bursaries. There are a number of, vast number of ways in which the money helps young people. And if that helps get young people feeling that they've got a stable and secure base from which to perform their lives, then that is half the battle. That's what we want to be getting to. So the more pennies and pounds that you can share and put into the campaign, the more young people we can help in a meaningful way. And hopefully you'll think that I'm earning the money with all of this walking. It's been quite an investment that I put in time-wise, training, gone through a few ups and downs, broken wrist, injured foot, COVID. So hopefully I've got most of the bad luck stories out of the way to enable me to set out in confidence day one. A few colleagues are joining me here and there along the way, but most of the walk I think I'll be doing on my own, which again, I think I'm going to reach some challenging places in my own mind as I go through that walk, I'm sure. I will be stopping off occasionally to meet up with colleagues. So there's the CIH Southwest colleagues who are going to organise to meet up with me at the end of one of the days. I would like to meet up with organisations, particularly looking at rural homelessness in coastal communities where there's a very particular issue in light of tourism, Airbnb, and the number of people who are actually living in a place, not the number of houses, but the size of the population in the dead of winter, very different to what's happening in say August time, and the impact of that on the ability to secure carers in a given location, or to allow young people to imagine themselves living in their own community when they're older. You know, all of this goes by the wayside in some of these communities where the prices are so prohibitively high to rent or to buy. So I'd like to explore some of those issues. But really, I just would like to survive the 46 days. I'd like to end up in pool with both feet intact and having achieved what I think certainly for me is a very, very ambitious goal. I'm not naturally a fit person. I mean, I'm fit enough, but I don't undertake this kind of thing normally. So a few of my friends are looking at me like, really? But, you know, that's part of the beauty of it. I'm heading into my 50th year on planet Earth. So it seemed like an opportune moment at which to really challenge myself. So yeah, it's the mixture of wanting to do a good thing, having a platform as CIH president, and, you know, partial midlife crisis possibly is having its part to play in all of this. But I'm hoping that it will inspire people to think more about homelessness, and to think more about what the social housing sector can do, should do and will do, and to think about how you and your organisations can play a part both in the research and in the fundraising. It could be, for example, that Wish colleagues, and I know that this is something that Lucy and the team are looking at, and we did a very short little video for this talk, and I think there's an idea to do that. But it could be that in other networks of which you're a part, you know, whether it's the region that you're in, whether it's other housing organisations, you may wish to get together a team and do a walk, a bike ride, you know, a cake sale, gin drinking, juggling, hula hooping, I don't know, lion taming, whatever it is that you want to do, you could do it, you know, have fun and raise money. So on the link that I have cheekily put up in the chat, there's like a blue button that says Give Now. And underneath that, there's an orange button that set up a fundraising team. It's called something like that, Start a Fundraiser. So have a think about what you might like to do for fun, for connection, being outdoors, connecting with other people, and for a great cause. So I think, Lynn, that's all I wanted to kind of say really about the campaign. And hopefully it's given you a bit of an idea as to why I've got to this point, both in terms of my career to date, but also in terms of reflection. You know, by sticking on a pair of boots, I'm not only walking, I'm thinking about what I've learned so far and where I think we need to be headed next as a sector. And so thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Jo. I think that was really inspiring, and really admire your commitment, I think, to the 42 days walking. And yeah, I think you'll have lots of time for reflection, and hopefully people join you along the way. Anyone got any questions for Jo, or any reflections? More related to you personally is just reflecting back on, you know, where you started in housing. If you should go back and kind of be able to talk to your young self, what advice would you give you?
That's a really good question. And I guess it's different to what advice I'd give to myself in the year that I started, and what advice I'd give to my younger self if I was that age now, because I think things have changed a lot in terms of expectations, performance management, opportunities. I mean, when I started out, people used to think about it at the council for life. It was, you know, I'm that old, but that was kind of the thought around it. I think these days it's more challenging, actually. And whilst I think in the mid to late 1990s, maybe we hadn't progressed quite so much on equality for women in the workplace as we do now, there are different and equally heavy challenges that women have to bear in the workplace today. You know, we're still not quite in the equality nirvana that we hoped we might be. So I'd probably tell myself to do what I'd done. I don't want to sound smug, but I don't think I'd change a lot, actually, Lynn. And I think partly that's because I did connect with other people. I saw a pathway, and I found people who would help to mentor me along that pathway. And the CIH was absolutely instrumental in that, in helping to frame and shape that. So I'd say stick at it, keep learning, grab the opportunities, say yes to what interests you. And this is something I've thought about, and I've got a teenage son, and I try and talk to him about the important things in life that are friends and purpose. And this is something that Matt Potts of Camarados would tell you if he was here. And I'd remind myself of that, and that just to take each step at a time, secure those mentoring relationships, keep up the training, and sometimes say no. I'm still not very good at this, but I think if you can align you and your purpose. So I guess my strap line, I wouldn't want it to be answers emails quite quickly. I think I do that, but that's not what I want to be remembered for. I'd like it to be, you know, Jo, she made people feel at home. And that might be linked to my housing and homelessness research and my life with CIH. But I also like to think it fits with what I do now at the university. I have another role as well. I'm co-chair of our women network, DMU Women. And that we try and amplify voices through connection. We run a whole range of events, and that's an opportunity that allows me to try and make women feel at home in the workplace, so I can expand my remit while still sticking to a core purpose. So, you know, anyone who has read Simon Sinek's Start With Why, that's something I've come to more recently. I guess I've also got a bit of a side hustle doing executive coaching, but I've reflected on that, and I think I perhaps always my purpose, but didn't know it explicitly. So this year in America and this experience in New York, I knew that I wanted to help people find home, but didn't explicitly realize that linked with the whole Start With Why and the purpose and the values. And I've tried not to deviate from that whilst grabbing opportunities that align with that. So yes, I'd remind my younger self to follow the value and the vision.
Thank you, that's great.
We haven't got any in the chat. We've had lots of people saying good luck, Jo. If you can see that. And
I need all the luck I can get.
And saying how proud you'll be when you've done it. Someone said, I bet you won't actually believe you've done it when you finished it, which is probably true.
No, and I'm going to take each day at a time as well. The thought of the whole thing is too much. It's given me the real wobbles this last week, if I'm honest. I've just thought, what have you got yourself into now? I've read Steve Peters, The Chimp Paradox. So for anyone else who's read that, about how your brain works, I do have to have a chat with my inner chimp, who lately has said, well, now look what you've got yourself into. You definitely can't do this. So I've decided to compartmentalize it and to think literally one day at a time. And so I've got my schedule. So, you know, day one, set out from Minehead, try and get to my B&B destination, and that will be a success. And then start again with day two, because otherwise the enormity of it is a bit too much for me at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's how you sort of approach a challenge like this, break it down into sort of manageable sections. And
yeah,
I had a look at the Just Giving page, and you've got £16,467 raised already.
brilliant.
That's amazing. I read the Inside Housing article a few months ago about the walk, and in that article it talked about how if people wanted to, they could come and join you on the walk. And I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about how that would work, because we spoke a little bit before the session started, and I'm quite jealous of this walk. But, so I would like to come down and join you for a bit. But I wondered how that would work and how other people might want to get involved if they can do that as well.
Yeah, no, I'd love that. I'm not publishing my schedule or a map, just partly because someone's advised me for personal safety not to do that. But there's an email address. It's on all of the links, but I'll put it in the chat in a moment anyway. And it's a generic email address that my research assistant and my secretary can both access. So even if it's after I've set off next Thursday, they will have a list of my scheduled days. And anyone on this call who's interested, who would like to join in, will therefore be able to see what date I think I'm going to be where, and they'll be able to put you in touch with me through a personal email account, and I can then make sure that I let you know whereabouts I think I'm going to be staying, and we can sort out the logistics that way. So it's a slightly convoluted, informal way of doing it, but I prefer to do it that way than stick everything online.
Yeah, I agree. I think that makes sense from a personal safety perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd welcome the opportunity to walk with people who'd like to walk with me, so that would be great.
And what are you going to do when you finish? How are you going to celebrate?
I am going to lie in a hammock and drink gin for a couple of days is my recovery plan. I'm a bit of a gin fan. I don't drink a huge amount just because I can't. I found I've got to the grand old age of 49 and it just, you know, I'm too tired to be drinking too much gin. But I'm heading into my 50th birthday. It's the weekend of the Jubilee. So I'll finish and have a bit of a small birthday celebration with my family and put my feet up for a couple of days. That's the plan.
That's great. We have had a question through when we've been talking, Jay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to read it out. So it's from Katie, and she's wished you all the very best.
Yeah.
There are the resources for the workshops, surveys, etc. available online. So I think it looks like Katie's from Aspire Housing. We formed a subgroup here at Aspire to look at them, and they're keen to be involved.
Yeah, that would be brilliant. Katie, I'm also going to put my personal email in the chat. So in addition to the Homeful one, you can contact me on this email address I'm just putting in, and so can anyone else who's interested. The resources will be online. They've just gone through ethics approval at the university. I'm testing them. I've got a sounding board of a few different people from different parts of the sector. So the survey links are currently with a few members of the sounding board to pilot them, and the resources toolkit also, but they'll go on the CIH/Homeful webpage, and anyone can access them. You can either let us know you're thinking of doing it and ask for advice and support, or it might be some people just download it and do it and send it back in. So it's very much that rethinking social housing model of setting up yourself. We do have, and I'm very grateful to the college sponsored this side of it. So aside from the charity fundraising, I've had the research sponsored as well. So we've got Morgan Sindel, the Home Group, and Longhurst have sponsored recruitment of a research assistant. So I've got the research assistant started last week, so he's really new. And we've also got Seddon Builders have sponsored a ring-fenced small budget for participant vouchers. So for those stakeholders who are not paid to be there through their organisations, if you see what I mean, we want to recognise their time, because otherwise it further compounds inequality. We can't do it through anything more substantial, you know, with contracts, because that would just be too much bureaucracy. But we're going to be purchasing electronic love to shop vouchers, and share those with any organisation that says that they're anticipating sort of, I don't know, involving a certain amount of residents. My team then can say, well, here are some vouchers to make sure that you're recognising their time. So there will be a number of different resources, and my research assistant at the end of the Homeful email account will be able to respond, and so will CIH to a degree through the resources being available on their website. So I hope that's helpful, but I'd love to hear from you, Katie, about what you want to do at Aspire, because I think that would be brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, to your sort of journey into housing, Joe, I thought it was quite interesting how you actively chose housing, because I think the conversations that we have regularly, and my experience is the same, as I fell into housing and love it. So I think it sort of links to that journey. So Rachel's asked, do you think housing qualifications are still good for progression? Some people have sort of mixed opinions on their usefulness.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit square, so I do like to have a framework and a bit of understanding for something. So as soon as I knew that I wanted to go into housing, I thought, right, where are the qualifications? What can I do? How can I learn? And for me, that has been the best thing. But the housing sector is so broad, and you might be a finance specialist, a marketing specialist, a comms specialist. And so there might be a professional body and a set of professional qualifications in your particular discipline within housing that would help you even more. But the beauty of CIH at the moment, and the stuff I love about their professional standards, is that they apply across the board. So you could do your housing professional qualification and then be a member and adhere to the professional standards, or you might have your qualification, as I say, in a different discipline within housing and be a member, and those professional standards still apply. And what I love about them is that I'll try and remember them all. There's integrity, inclusion, ethics, knowledge, skills, advocacy, and leadership. Hooray, I remembered all 7. So only 2 of those 7 are related to the core discipline, so knowledge and skills. All of the others are about who we are as people and how we should be treating others and our approach. So this is a very long-winded way of saying, well, both things are true. Housing profession, housing qualifications are really important, I think, because they help imbue the sector with that sense of purpose, history, values, you know, learning about the culture of social housing management. But, you know, you wouldn't want it to be exclusively only looking at housing qualifications. But where it's all brought in together, I think, is around those values of the professional standards. So do what sets your heart on fire, basically, Rachel. If you're in marketing or whatever and you want to do a marketing qualification, do that, and then look at how you can be a member of CIH and adhere to the values within your discipline. So I hope that's helped.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm a housing officer, so I've been in housing for 5 years now. Got myself up to my level 3, so I want to do 4 and 5.
Brilliant. I'd heartily encourage you to do that. I see it on Twitter quite a bit. People have such a sense of pride in doing it. So I see people, you know, kind of photo with their certificates saying they've made, you know, the next level qualification. Being an educator myself, I've obviously seen the value and benefit to the students I have taught over the last 20 years. You know, and some of them I'm coming back to, and they're chief executives of their housing association, or they're in other roles, and they've gone from that point where I might have taught them, you know, a few years ago, to me now saying, can your organisation help support the campaign? And that is such a lovely journey to be part of. And sometimes students have said, you know what, I didn't see the point of what you were telling us in that series of lectures, you know, 3 or 4 lectures. But now I really do. And that I love. At the time when you get your module feedback form and you're judged on this as a lecturer, and you've got people saying, not sure I saw the relevance, it might be a bit irritating at the time to read that. But then when you hear someone and they are saying, I totally get it, you know, 3 years after I'd finished, I was doing this project and I thought, oh yes, that's why they were talking to me about this. So yeah, it's just part of that. You know, we perhaps overuse the word journey, but it's so applicable now. I'm thinking about this walk, but we need these milestones. And I think it's just that sense of achievement, and you're treating your brain, aren't you, to something, and you're able to build frameworks around what you're doing practically and make sense of it and critique yourself and your organization. And that's the difference between education and training. You know, organisations put training on to tell you how to do it their way. Education is for you so that you can build your whole career, and it's not necessarily around one organisation, but it's for you to set yourself this career journey, really.
Given I don't think we've got any more questions, I thought I might take Chair's privilege of just, you mentioned about the reputation issues that social housing have got, and obviously the champions through ITV and Quajo, is that how you say his name?
Well, I think I've still said Quajo, but I don't know. It could be Quajo.
Yeah.
He's actually a student at Montfort University, but he's not on a course that I have involvement with. So I've not had the pleasure of meeting him yet, but he's an amazing person.
He is amazing. So kind of my question is, what do we need to do to repair the reputational damage that those two campaigns have caused? And they're very right, they're very right to have challenged us, but and as you say, it's not across the board, but some big players have been caught out by that, and it just feels like mud sticks, and we all need to regroup and refresh ourselves and get our reputations back up there.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's a moment of real reflection, and I think it's important to remember the good stuff that we do, when we're listening to this. As you say, absolutely just criticism. So it's not about being defensive and saying, yes, we do this. It's also, we hear you, this needs to be remedied, and we also do this. To not take a defensive approach, because it can be difficult if you read about this stuff. I mean, I found it toe curling. I've really felt a sense of shame actually about some of the stories that have come out. And it's really important that we say, yes, we see this and it's not right and it does need changing. I think there's an article that Gavin wrote last week, and he really talked about this in a way that, housing officers will have been into some of those properties, and for whatever reason, it wasn't remedied. So it's either somebody who may not think they've got the agency to do anything about it. So I don't think there are people working in the social housing sector who don't care. I think it may be that people feel they've not got the agency, or that the systems are so cumbersome, or that they've tried reporting something in before and nothing's happened. And so there's some placation going on. We're placating tenants. Yes, we'll do it, and nothing happens. And it's how we empower individual housing professionals to remember those professional standards. If we think about integrity and inclusion as the first two, some of those videos that Quajo has put online, I mean, none of that represents integrity and inclusion for the tenants. They're left with the cockroaches or the damp or whatever, and it doesn't feel right even saying that in this day and age, does it, that people are living with that? So it's really about a joint sense of purpose and accountability, that would then mean that a single housing officer going into that property would think this isn't right, and something has to happen as a result of it. And then on the other side, the chief executives, particularly the very large housing organisations, and I've seen that Alison Inman on social media has perhaps started a question again about the scale and size of housing providers.
Mm-hmm.
But those chief executives need to think, how are our systems working? Do I know, does the board know where our worst properties are? I'm a board member not for a housing organisation, but for a research charity. And there's that, the responsibility of governance is to know enough about the organisation and what's going on. Similarly with housing associations, the board need to be asking, take us to your worst prepared properties. Tell us where they are, and where's the action plan to improve. Show us how you are responding to residents. Show us how you're proactively talking with residents, because it shouldn't be on someone in their early 20s to put films up on YouTube to make these changes. So yeah, it's that balance, I think, Lynn, of recognising failure, but also remembering how good we are when we're at our best and not feeling overwhelmed by it.
Thank you. It's a great answer. And I think you kind of spoke about the thing that I've always felt, both when I was on the front line, but also when I kind of became MD and an exec director within the housing association, is encouraging the people to walk down the path with their eyes open, but also have the confidence and hopefully the organisation's got the values to listen and for those voices to be heard. Because I think I've always said that the front line is where it happens, and they know what it's like. They're the closest to the tenants, and other than the tenants, they know the most about what it's like to live in social housing.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think what's important for the senior leadership in the sector is to remember how much time is needed for housing officers to undertake this important role. I mean, back when I was doing this in the mid to late 1990s, which again, it's almost before the birth of the internet, it just feels like a different era. But time was given, time was allowed, even though the patch size, certainly my second job was big enough and it felt like a busy job. I felt like if an elderly tenant asked me to stay for a cup of tea to talk about things, I felt that I had time to do that, not with everyone, but where I picked up those non-verbal clues of this is someone who's lonely, or I've not had the door handle moment yet. The thing that you get asked to go and see people about is never the thing that they need to tell you. It's always just as you're leaving. So there was enough time back then, I think, to do that and to connect the dots and to put people in touch with one another. What worries me, and this is happening in the academic sector too, is the paucity of time to actually do this role, so that you're not chasing, key performance indicators and targets of how many rings before you pick up the phone or whatever. And I get the point of right first time, but it can lead to short-term solutions of, well, I've got my bit for today right just there, and I've seen this bit, but I've ignored the fact that there's damp there, or cockroaches there, or somebody lonely here, or potentially some remediation needed, to help support someone who's got disability, or there's just so many different things, and it's about that human connection and the time. So one of the words I don't like that's overused is resilience. And whilst we all need to draw from the inner strength, and I'm going to need it in spades on this blooming walk, it's something that we have to structure in. So I don't think we should be recruiting for resilience, for example. I don't think we should be expecting individuals to be, or to resilient their way out of a situation. Resilience has to be built into an organisation's structure so that there is time and flex and space and support for colleagues to be able to do their jobs and do it well, and to support tenants. So I think we need to be careful of the language we use, the way that we frame key performance targets, the measurement standards. There's a real need, I think, for the senior leadership across the sector to think about this again, and to talk with, as you say, the colleagues working day to day facing tenants, because they do know what's going on.
Thank you.
There's one just been put in. We got time for one more, Joe, if that's okay with you. I know we're bombarding you with lots. Someone said that they're currently preparing for their big chat. We're getting into our communities with board members, directors and resident board members, asking our residents how we're doing, where we can improve, what we can do better, and what we are doing well. So that sounds like a really helpful to approach there.
I think that's fantastic, and to frame it as a big chat, so that it's open to everyone, rather than could you respond to these 5 questions on this area of the service. And that's where you get to the spaces in between issues, and to bring everybody on board, I think, is a really great idea, Lynn. So I'll be really interested to hear about how that goes, and it might be something that you might be able to share with me by email after you've done it, particularly the Homeful email web address, because we're looking for examples, and I think examples around communication are really important. It's not only the bread and butter of how you're delivering quality accommodation, it's how we're talking with all of the stakeholders involved. So I'd love to hear from you at some point in the future about that, Lynn.
Yeah, I can do that for you.
Brilliant, thank you.
So we're almost out of time, so I'd just like to say a big thank you, Joe. I found that really interesting. Amazing that you've carried that theme of homelessness through your career, and good luck to the challenge that you're doing.
Thank you.
And yeah, I encourage everybody to get involved either through sponsorship or the work that Katie said Aspire were doing, and connect through to Jo to support her campaign and her research. And I like the fact that it's linked, it's not just your campaign, it's linked to research as well. It's a real good piece of work, I think, that you're doing, and I really admire that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And yeah, I think what we at Wish will be doing is the people that we're on the slightly scale is what can we do better? We'd love that feedback either in the chat or again through to Wish through our contact mechanisms. But yeah, thank you everybody, and hope you enjoyed the session. It looks from the chat from the poll as if you did. And thank you, Jo. Good luck.
Thanks very much, Lynn. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.